Shocking news of R-Truth leaving the WWE. He said he was released. People say his contract's up. He's not the only one as well. And it's not the only shocking thing that happened in WWE this week. We'll be talking about it and more. This is WrstlXtra. Yo. This is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate. Always joined by my tag team partner. Say his name, he shall appear. The professor that is Gerard Bonner. We're going to go straight into this one, as we always do every single week. The shocking news. R-Truth, over the weekend, I believe it was Sunday, was it?
Yes.
Shared the news via X that he is no longer with the WWE. He used the words released. We found out about a few hours later that it was reported and apparently confirmed that it will be his contract that's not being renewed, not that he was released from his contract. Gerard, does that even make it any better? How did you feel when you read this? And, you know, I know a lot of people probably thought it was some April Fool's in an R-Truth style. Of course, it was the 1st of June. So in R-Truth style, it would make sense for it not to be on the 1st of April. But when you realized that this was true, when you realized this was actually happening, what was your initial reaction?
You know, when I realized this was actually happening, it was shocking. It was shocking because I think there are certain people who have just become the fabric of WWE. And when you think about them, you know, you use those terms lifers and people you just never expect to be gone from the WWE, either for their reasons or for the WWE's reasons. I can't even imagine it. It was even wilder when you think that it was a week ago where he's in a marquee match on Saturday night's main event with the WWE champion. To think that 48 hours before this, he's on a match against JC Mateo on SmackDown and gets saved by Jimmy Uso. And then there's a reel of Jimmy Uso and R-Truth on the WWE socials following that, talking about we're real family, like this type of thing. It seems very much like he was very involved in the fabric of what was happening with WWE. That tweet that he sent out as of right now has 21.7 million views. 21.7 million views in 48 hours. That's insane. And so it's a moment that's extremely shocking, I think, because again, R-Truth ultimately, and as we think about it, he really, I think, has redefined what we consider a successful wrestling career to be in the WWE. Certainly, you could talk about his life before WWE, being the first recognized Black NWA World Champion. You know, the stats are out there that he held the title in his reign longer than the 3 combined reigns of Dusty Rhodes. But when you look at what R-Truth contributed to the WWE, he's honestly the reason they changed the name from WWF to WWE. He was the entertainment, the part that we tuned in and enjoyed, whether it was, you know, Little Jimmy and, you know, all of those kinds of antics, or if it was his confusion about whether or not he was actually in a Money in the Bank match or in a Royal Rumble match or whatever. His humor, his ability to cause, you know, the stars to break character and laugh in the middle of the ring, and no one was safe. No one was safe. He's the guy that made you feel good. He's the guy, and here's what's wilder. I mean, I was on his Instagram and he had just posted promotion for the Saudi Arabia shows that are coming up for Night of Champions and SmackDown. That was his last post on Instagram before announcing that he was released. So it's shocking because I don't know what the conversations were that sat back and said, we're not going to renew his contract. you know, it's certainly, when you look at how he's been used, he wasn't phased out as a number of people who we've seen are being released, where they just kind of vanish, fade away, and you go, oh, okay, I haven't seen them on TV for 3 months. Not the case at all. So it's very shocking, and I know it's causing a lot of people to ask, okay, what's really going on when someone as legendary and beloved as R-Truth, who, I mean, checked all the boxes. You're talking about a T-shirt. His latest T-shirt, Ron Cena, was a top seller on WWE Shop. It is now gone, which is the wild part. Like, they've taken that down, along with the whole idea of obviously he being released or contract not being renewed, and have you. So it is a mind-boggling decision, because when you think about all the reasons why someone would stay with a company, he checked those boxes. I don't know why this moment happened, but it's a wild. And given some of the chants that the fans had last night, it's clear this was not just an internet outrage.
And here's the thing: it wasn't just a fan outrage. You know, we've seen his colleagues, former tag team partners, you know, not former friends, but friends within the company, whether they're former wrestlers, whether they work in the back, whatever it is. Some of them have been outspoken on the internet, on X, on Instagram. Some of them have even, you know, the Miz has, you know, it's been publicized. The Miz has taken all of his, you know, WWE connections in terms of his, you know, his handle and his description and all these kinds of things, and kind of, you know, like a protest. I believe Gunther's been done the same thing. It's been reported as well, and there've been so many people that have you know, been outspoken about their outrage. And here's the thing for me, like, you know, you mentioned about R-Truth and his entertainment, being the funny guy. You know, he made everyone laugh, whether that was, you know, breaking character or part of the scene, whatever it is. I will say this, me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the comedy within wrestling, but there are two people who, for me, were so good. They were so undeniable in their role. One being Santino Marella, the other one being R-Truth.
Yes.
So when they came on, I was expecting and waiting for the comedy and ready for it, and all the rest of it. And that says a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember Mex has mentioned this so many times about people's ageism, this, that, and the next, and you know, it kind of is a bit of a thing within wrestling. And Truth, 53 years old. But Mex always says, you know, it's not about someone's age, it's about their ability.
Right.
Tell me a time when that man ever looked out of shape, out of place, in the ring with anyone.
Right.
Not once, never, ever, never slowed down. In the same way he was K-Quick when he first debuted, he's still that same guy, you know, 20 plus years later. So it baffles me that this decision was made so abruptly, or it feels so abrupt. And you talk about, you know, his merch sales, the last shirt. He had the shirt with the Judgment Day, the names on. He put his own one, put it out there. Top seller within that first week of it coming out. So I'm still trying to find reasons as to what made them think that getting rid of him made sense. Now, one of the things that was put out there, and I believe this is the same thing with Carlito, with some of the other releases that we had about a month ago, was people being not used or on the undercard, all these kinds of things. And to a point, I understand that. You know, it wasn't that Truth was, you know, always on our TVs every week, or at least since the start of this year, for all sorts of different reasons. But then to have a man like that was so unique in so many ways, still added value, monetary value with the shirt sales and stuff like that. in his popularity whenever he was on TV, all those kinds of things, then just poof, be gone. And the most difficult part of it was, of course, his his involvement with John Cena. And I remember when we first found out about this match happening on or possibly happening at first on Saturday Night Main Event, and our whole talk was about, oh, maybe he should win it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe he should win it, just as almost like a thank you. And even if that lasted only 2 weeks, he gets beaten by Cena again the next day or 2 weeks later or whenever they come together again. But no, instead, they would rather him sell a shirt for a week, lose a match within 4 minutes, and then get beaten down by Jason Mateo a few less than a week later. Have, as you said, the reel on socials talking and almost furthering a storyline with him and Jimmy Uso and the bloodline, and then bam, just gone. So my question is, and I really doubt you can answer this question, but my question is, at what point did they know that they're not going to renew his contract? Was it literally the same day that they told him? Was it a week or 2 weeks before? Like, how do you, I imagine it was weeks before. And how do you get to put him through all of that and then bam?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I don't know what their process is when it comes to deciding which contracts will be renewed, how people will be released, all of those kinds of things. I definitely don't know that. What seems to be difficult is what we've seen over the years when it comes to the releases is it seems as though we tend to find out when the wrestlers find out, because the wrestlers will either let us know or there will be some sort of news item that comes out that informs us of the release. So, kind of the wild part is there doesn't seem to be a lot of time between when the wrestlers find out and when the public finds out. And I don't know who's at fault there, right? Like, I think on one hand, the wrestlers, sometimes the news doesn't come from the wrestlers. Sometimes it comes from whomever the news people are. But then sometimes it does come from the wrestlers, and perhaps the wrestlers feel as though it is their duty to let their fans know what's going on, which I understand. What I do think is challenging in all of it is, getting released from your job, whether it is being fired or your contract not being renewed, is a pretty traumatic kind of experience, particularly if you didn't see it coming. And I think it's difficult enough for people to process that. Having to process it and then process it with the public is equally difficult. So I can only imagine how difficult this is for Truth, for Carlito, for those, for Valhalla, for those who were released in the last month that we talked about previously, some of whom are, getting to that 30-day period, if they were from NXT specifically, where they're now getting to work again. Very, very difficult. And so I'm hoping that our Truth is at least getting some degree of, I won't say satisfaction, but feeling supported by all of these fans. I mean, almost 22 million views on that tweet alone, tons of outpouring of love from fans and from his colleagues, from both in and out of the WWE. I hope that as fans, we will always learn to be appreciative of the time that we have with these stars in the spaces that they are, because what this shows us is you don't really know when all of that can change. I don't think anybody thought after Friday night that would be the last time, at least for the time being, we would see Truth on our WWE TVs. So this is, it's something. It's really, really something. And I don't know how long it is between the decision that they make and the time that they inform the wrestler. But it does stand to say that there's very short periods of time between when the wrestler knows and when we as the public know.
For sure, for sure. We've kind of come to a place where, this is the norm. In terms of the releases, them coming out of nowhere, us knowing within 24 hours the same time as the wrestlers themselves. But we have seen in the past, and we kind of maybe thought there was a little bit of an encouragement in it, to where maybe I think it was about a year ago when Scripps was released from NXT.
Yeah,
he knew that he had 30 days, not necessarily the 30-day non-compete, but 30 days up until his contract was actually coming to an end.
Right.
And that kind of gave us a bit of an encouragement, because in the past it was releases, so boom, contract cut, just straight up.
Yeah.
Now we're in this space, and I guess AEW kind of made this a bit more popular, or more normal, to where it was end of a contract, not renewing. Okay. But is there any way to justify or to make sense of these releases? Because sometimes when you look at certain wrestlers, as you said earlier, some of them, they fade away, we don't see them for a while. So when they're released, it's kind of like, oh, it's not nice, but it makes sense. Is there any way to justify Truth's release or the decision not to renew his contract?
Well, I will say it this way. I think this is where terminology becomes important, because if it's a release, then there is, to a degree, a breaking of the contract, right? So you were let go before your contract came to an end, and thusly, that's where usually the 30 or 60-day non-compete comes into play. If they choose not to renew your contract, while that may be deemed unfortunate, the good parts of that is that you obviously are paid until the end of your contract. But what that also allows is, if your contract ends June 30, July 1, you can show up somewhere. And so I think for an R-Truth, for instance, and you were mentioning Scripps, shout out to Sydney Akeem. When you at least know, okay, this is when my contract is up, you can plan for whatever you want to do next. And so I think if there's anything good about this, it's that the contract itself wasn't renewed. And when I say good, I mean that's better than being released, which is usually connected to poor performance, et cetera, et cetera. I think what can be hard for some of us when it comes to a contract not being renewed is, in our minds, you do a good job, you produce money, you produce whatever for the company, whatever the company is, and you go, oh, let's extend the contract. I've been there from a contract perspective where you've done a great job. And sometimes the release had nothing to do with you. Right. And I don't think we're considering that part. Right. This may not be a reflection of a poor job done by R-Truth. This also might not be a reflection of what WWE thinks of R-Truth. These are the parts of the conversation that most of us are never privy to. We don't know what the plans are on the WWE or TKO side that would say we're going in a different direction. So let's just say, now, keep in mind, we are merely extrapolating right now. And I'm saying that and pontificating so that people don't take this and run with it as law, okay? But what I found, I'll just speak for my own example, in cases where I've had contracts that were not renewed, it wasn't that I didn't do a good job. It wasn't that it wasn't productive. It wasn't that there weren't numbers. It was that that particular company or entity was moving in a different direction. So what if, and we're going to throw this out here, what if the WWE is moving more into combat sports as a presentation versus the entertainment side of it? Think about that, okay? Now, there are a couple of things around this that make sense. Obviously, it's close connection to the UFC. The idea that they're making a lot of moves similar to the UFC. For instance, moving their PLEs from Sundays to Saturdays, exploring more of the international market, as we've seen, making more inroads in the fight capital like Las Vegas, right? So they're making specific moves that are more like the UFC. If it could be a situation where they're saying, while our name is World Wrestling Entertainment, maybe we won't be leaning on the entertainment side as heavy. Think about what we've been seeing on Raw and SmackDown and NXT, the far more athletic matches that we've been seeing. The addition of guys like Penta and Ray Phoenix, this partnership with AAA that's bringing Vikingo. We think about it. All the times that we saw Vikingo over in AEW, and we were like, WWE would never.
Yep, very true.
Well, next Saturday, WWE will. Right? With a championship on the line. There's going to be a lot. So, and there's been an influx of luchadors. And that luchador style and that style that we've seen that has defined more of AEW has shown up in WWE. So what if the release of R-Truth and Carlito is not a reflection of their poor performance, but a reflection of a directional change that WWE is making to be taken more seriously as a sport, which means you remove the overt entertainment aspect of it.
Right.
So if that's the case, now think about it. If that's the case, then you see why R-Truth would not fit in this model. And you see why Carlito wouldn't fit in this model. And so that, again, is not a reflection of R-Truth or Carlito being bad for the company. It's a reflection of the directional change that the company may be going. So while we are all not understanding it from a business perspective in terms of dollars and cents and butts and seats, maybe the direction is going in a different way, such that the entertainment value that those particular wrestlers brought will no longer be leaned upon as heavily as it once was.
And here's the thing to kind of boost that thinking as well, to kind of give, put more meat on the bones of that thinking is while the entertain, you said the word entertainment or the overt entertainment, and we talk about the luchador style and the more athletic things, maybe the entertainment isn't then the some of the comedy maybe, but the entertainment is in the ring.
Right.
So that's where the entertainment comes. And that's, for me, that's always been the thing for me when it comes to wrestling. That's where, for me, the entertainment comes in. I've always understood entertainment is more than what's in the ring, and it's kind of why the WWF, decided to become WWE, as much as it was kind of about the lawsuit as well. But at the same time, they clearly made that decision, and they said it. It became a thing where what they do in the ring and how they make the matches and all that kind of stuff, and the kayfabe became secondary. But for me, the entertainment for me was missing in the ring.
Correct.
So maybe, and I think I agree with you on this, or understand that perspective, is that the entertainment is now so much more in the ring. And again, we've seen. Here's the other part of it, and the title of this particular show is called Connected Truth. And the reason why is because we're going to talk about what happened with Ricky Saints losing the North American Championship. But it all connects in a way because we're talking about the development of new stars. And I don't want to bring the age into it. And again, I use the argument of Truth still being able to go toe-to-toe with anyone and be just as athletic and entertaining in that same way. So there is still a level of him specifically kind of feeling like, okay, still, why him? But we're looking at building younger stars. We've seen we saw the shocking outcome of NXT last week when, first Ricky Starks loses his North American Championship. I think the shock wasn't necessarily who to, but how short his reign was. It just wasn't expected. But then the next thing was Stephanie Vaquer losing to JC Jane. We're not going to talk about why JC Jane, but anyway, that was the shock.
Yeah,
that was the shock. Not to say JC Jane isn't competent, but at the same time, we would have put at least 5 other names before her, basically.
Yes.
But on top of all of that, what's now kind of come out is, and we saw it happen last night on Raw.
Yeah,
Stephanie is now on Raw.
Yes,
she is officially on Raw and in Money in the Bank. We're not talking about here,
right?
Roxanne, Julia wasn't in NXT a long time. They're already talking about Jordan Grace and Ricky Saints imminently being on the main roster.
Yes.
So we're not waiting here to develop, especially the more experienced stars. The same ones I've just mentioned. And on top of all of that, we talked about LFG last week. We talked about Evolve last week. We're seeing a lot more of that happening. Kelly Armstrong, we're going to talk about Kelly Armstrong being the first Evolve Women's Champion. We're seeing the men's one is going to be decided this week as well. And going even further back with those same people is this whole NIL program. They're focusing more on people coming from sports. Elite athletes coming from sports. Again, it further extenuates the whole notion of TKO and WWE going more down the athletic and the combat sports element of this whole thing. So we can make sense of it to a degree, but I still think it's still a difficult thing to take in. Again, as I said, with R-Truth specifically, him still not being a part of it, there's still question marks, even with understanding the different direction that they seem to clearly want to be going in, or the fast tracking of certain stars being pushed to the main roster, because they said, I think it was said somewhere that it was expected that if some are coming in, as in from NXT, some are going to go out. And to me, that makes sense as well. As difficult as that is, it makes sense. We've seen, and it's we've talked about it in length on here. We've heard it, the conversation carry on and on for a few years. In AEW, there was a scenario for a few years where it was just new people all the time. And now they're in a position where they have to get rid of certain people because they're not being used. There's no space for them. There's no storylines. There's no creative. There's no, all of those things. And unfortunately, the nature of the beast is, if you're not being used, if we can't find a space for you, we're not renewing your contract.
Right.
And again, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good whatsoever. It's not to justify or to make it sound good. It's just the truth of the matter at hand. So it's a very difficult thing. But I think what a lot of people would still have issue with is the way it's happened with quite a few, especially some of the others that that were released a month ago. Jakara Jackson, Braun Strowman, Shayna Baszler, a few others that were on our TVs only a week or so before they were released or told they're not contracts not being renewed and stuff like that. I think it's that part that still raises question marks regardless of this new direction.
Sure.
I would rather it be, okay, we've not got a space for them. We're probably not going to use them for a while. Just let them fizzle out. But we've seen them on our TV, and then a week later they're gone.
Yeah, what's so, and this is one of the real challenges of kind of where we all get to sit. Most companies aren't going to just give us carte blanche in terms of, hey, we're going to pull it back. Here's the direction we're moving. Here's why we did X, Y, Z. What is tough? It is tough anytime we see cuts. I think because we get attached to people that we see on our screens for whatever their entertainment value is to us, the idea of them losing a job or not being on our screens and being cut off abruptly always hits kind of different. And so I think there's always, no matter the explanation we put to it, none of us want to see the people that we enjoy on our television screens leave our television screens for any reason. Even if they decide they want to retire, we're like, oh man, like why you gotta go? Like, there's an attachment that we have to it, and there's nothing wrong with that attachment. I think what's challenging in a space like WWE or AEW, but WWE specifically, is when we talk about all of these pathways for people to get in, whether it is, the NIL program, WWE ID, Evolve, LFG, like all of these ways are funneling you ultimately to NXT, and then with the hopes of Raw or SmackDown. There will forever be more roster than there is television time.
Yeah, of course.
Always, always, always. And so I don't know what the internal number is. I'm not privy to that, but I'm sure there is an internal number that they have where they go, all right, we need this many active people on the roster to be able to adequately get them on the television and that type of thing. And when they are over that number, they have to make some choices. And, when they reach that number, how they go about it is hard to tell. The things that we aren't privy to is, like if we are privy to what we see on television.
Right.
We don't see what's happening in the Performance Center. We don't see what the plans are in the back room. And I don't think, honestly, when this Unreal show comes on, I don't think that's going to really tell us, because that's still going to be retro, right? So we don't know what the plans are for whomever they're making plans for. So here's the thing, and this is, I want people to hear my heart on this. It is actually better for the WWE or for any company to say, if we're not going to use you, we're going to give you the opportunity to go. Because we would get mad. We used to get mad at places like WWE and AEW when they had people on their rosters that they weren't using. And we're all going, well, just release them. Just let them go free. Okay, well, then if they release them, why did you release them? That's not fair. I think the beauty of today's wrestling environment is that there are so many places to go and apply your craft. You mentioned Jakara Jackson, now known as Mara Sade. Shout out to Mara, who I think is already doing a great job of taking what she's learned at WWE, which is the power of the visual, the power of the vignette. She's taken that, she's used social media, she's used this to reintroduce herself, give people the proper pronunciation of her name, give them an idea of where she's going and what she's doing, and signing matches. And all of a sudden we know places we're going to see her. I think what being in WWE allows for you to do as a wrestler or as a personality, it's like being president of the United States. You can forever say you are a former WWE superstar, which gives you a leg up above anybody else in the indies, no matter what they've done.
Right.
Plus now you get to see the advantage of how they use television, how they use promotion, how they use marketing, which most indie wrestlers aren't privy to. They never ever get that. So even if your time in WWE was short, and I don't necessarily want people to have short times in WWE, you end up with an advantage over those who have never crossed the shores of WWE.
And we've seen that, and we've heard the difference as well from the likes of Jade Cargill, for example, who said when she came to WWE, she's seen it's a completely different beast. Completely different beast. And we've seen it on the opposite side. We've seen wrestlers that have come from WWE and gone to other places, whether that be Impact, AEW, to the Indies, and said, oh, I've got to do this on my own now. It's a completely different beast. But at the same time, as you said, with those that have come from WWE and gone on to kind of have to do their thing on their own, they're still at some level of advantage. And there's something to take from that, which is a good thing. But yeah, as you said, when it comes to fans having attachments to certain wrestlers, whether they be their favorites, whether they're just used to seeing them, whether it's kind of just hard to hear or read the tweets that say, "Oh, I'm not going to be here anymore," or "I've been released," or whatever it is. When we see the interviews, when they finally get to talk, and you're hearing about some of the difficult things I had to endure, and how they found out, and it was just a phone call while they're sitting in their living room, and all those kinds of stories. Like, it makes the whole thing difficult. But I think what we have to remember as well is, as much as it's kind of part of the reason why they entertain us, we have to remember that we can't be attached to something that we're only exposed to for 3 hours a week.
For sure.
And of course, if we're talking about specific wrestlers, 10 to 20 minutes at the most?
Right.
A week?
I think to that point, though, what makes it difficult is those wrestlers, because it's entertainment, they provide an escape for a lot of us.
Of course.
And so, of course, we get it. And it's the same reason why we love movie stars and cartoon characters and actors and what have you. Here's the cool part. The cool part is, if these wrestlers choose to continue wrestling, we have the privilege of following them in wherever their career goes. And with the internet being what it is, we have access to all of these streaming services. We can find them as long as they let us know where to find them. So all hope isn't lost. I think we just have a hard time making sense of the why, which in some cases we'll probably never really know. But I do think, and I'll say this about the WWE, which is hard for a lot of people, we have to remember we are still barely 2 years removed from a Vince McMahon-led WWE, which was the only WWE that any of us ever knew. So the idea, so we got used to Vince McMahon's WWE, whether we liked it or not. And that's where we adopted, it's just entertainment. So we indoctrinated ourselves with that. But there are new sheriffs in town. And if those new sheriffs say, hey, we want to go athletics, combat, and pull back on the more entertainment elements of it, then that means the direction's going to change. And I mean, I don't know, if we look at certain things are already pointing to that. For instance, bringing in Joe Tessitore, right? Somebody who did 30 years in college football. Legitimate sport, a very sports-driven kind of space. So if you want this to be presented as sports, you bring in a sportscaster, right? Look at how they're paying more attention to stats, and they put them on the screens when a wrestler comes out. And they had stopped doing that for a while. Look at even small things like, the ticker tape on the bottom, where they'll take time to give you the headlines, what's already happened on the show so far, who's done this, how this has happened. They're giving you recaps of things that you would get in other sports. You get that in the NBA. So I think we need to start looking at the fact that they haven't told us this, but they're showing us that they're really turning WWE to be presented as on the same level with the same kinds of statistics and information that other sports are presented with. So that means the product is going to ultimately change, and it has changed. And I don't know that we've necessarily acknowledged that.
Yeah, and even down to the detail of them walking in with with their regular clothes and their
that's so NBA, NFL.
Of course,
right?
Of course,
they didn't do that before.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all. So there is definitely a direction, and it's not to say that you have to like it, but I guess sometimes when something's hard, when you begin to understand it, it's easier to take in. It's easier to make a more a better decision as to whether you do like it or not.
Right.
And it's just the way it is, and I guess the outrage of fans isn't necessarily going to change that. Not to say that the fans have no say whatsoever, but at the same time, it's a lot less than a lot of people seem to think they should have. Yeah. And that is something that is lost for a lot of people, a lot of fans as well, especially in this day and age with Twitter and social media and people, saying whatever they want, can say whenever and whatever they want, and all that kind of thing. So sometimes, and I look at it like this, even back in the Vince McMahon days, when when certain things would happen and certain storylines would go a certain way, maybe, or certain wrestlers wouldn't be there, or get released, or whatever it is, or certain ones would be used more than others. I always understood it to be this was the network making the decision, and not necessarily the producers or the trainers or the coaches. And I think we're in that same space. We kind of thought that that would disappear now that it's not, it's not governed by, NBC or the USA Network or whatever it is. But now more so TKO, not even Netflix, as far as we understand, at least anyway. But TKO. But then you've got to understand, yes, TKO is a combat sports company, but it's not a wrestling company.
Correct.
Correct. Mr. Emmanuel ain't coming from doing 30 years in the ring in ROH. Right. And then decided to take over TKO and what have you. So, again, there are going to be decisions that aren't going to sit right with us or necessarily make sense to the wrestling fan who's been around like we have for 20, 30 plus years and want to see certain things done a certain way because we're using our wrestling heads and not necessarily our business heads.
Yeah.
And
you made a great point. Yeah, you made a great point because, again, the Vince McMahon-led WWE is different than a parent company over the WWE. And I think that's the environment we're in, which is honestly different than mostly all of the other wrestling companies. I say mostly because with TNA, you got Anthem over them. And so you've got but again, look at the connection between TNA and WWE, both of them with parent companies that they're dealing with. So this is challenging the average wrestling fan to have to think differently because it's not the way that it used to be all the way around.
But at the same time, it's not that different either. As I said,
true.
The TV network was not a wrestling company. It was a TV network.
Right.
TKO is not a wrestling company. It's a combat sports company run by businessmen. So, it's different, but yet, on surface level, it's no different. We're still having non-wrestling guys at the top making the biggest decisions. Maybe not every single one, but the biggest decisions. So we're going to see certain things that just don't sit right with us. Are not going to make sense to us. But I think that's something we have to remember in order to kind of move forward. Again, doesn't mean you're supposed to like it. It just makes it easy to understand it. I mentioned the shocking news or the shocking events that happened on last week. NXT. Ricky Saints. It's just been a shocking month. 30 days of shocks coming from the WWE. Ricky Saints lost his NXT North American Championship to Ethan Page.
Yes.
A phenomenal match. I think it was an absolutely brilliant match. I think even just as a match, and not just because I'm a fan of Ricky Saints, but even just as a match, if Ricky Saints was to end up winning that match, I think it would have made that match even more special because of what what he went through in the ring and throughout the match, and to then come out on top would have been just amazing.
Yeah.
But he's lost the title. The big talk is, he could possibly end up, or is expected to end up on the main roster. In your mind, is this the correct decision? And I say decision in terms of everything that's happened. So the length of time he's been in NXT, the way or the short period of time that he had the North American Championship, and Ricky Saints going to the main roster. Do you think does it make sense to you?
It does. It makes sense. And here's why it makes sense. When Starks came over to NXT, he was already a star. And we knew that. As a matter of fact, I think this is a great case study in terms of the differences between some of the major names that have come over to AEW, come over from AEW. So you look at a Jade Cargill, who was a TBS champion, who comes over straight off of TV, but then she disappears for months. And then you have an Ethan Page, who really spent more time in Ring of Honor than he did AEW. He comes over and he's been in NXT for a year or so. And then you have a Ricky Starks who comes over and who's been in NXT for barely 3 months. And you look at all of them and you go, hey, they're all from AEW. But you have to couple in their wrestling experience, their TV experience. So Jade Cargill was still relatively new to the wrestling business. So it made sense that she didn't necessarily go to NXT, but she took a lot of time to train. Ethan Page happens to be in that veteran seat who never really got that chance to be the big TV star that he could be. He did more in TNA, honestly, than he did in AEW or Ring of Honor. Correct. So this giving him that opportunity to do that. Plus, remember, NXT always needs an elder statesman there. Always. The elder statesman always helps to guide the ship and things of that nature. That's what Ethan Page is doing. But then you take a Ricky Starks, multi-time of all of them, the most decorated to come over from AEW. Remember, he's a former NWA television champion, someone who has spent time on camera, is TV ready. And so for him, it just was, let's get you used to the WWE way. This has been the challenge, and we'll probably get to the end of NXT in a little bit. But one of the things that is the overarching thing is where we were accustomed previously to lengthy title reigns, when you're dealing with superstars that have more experience, then there's less time needed in a place like NXT, where you can just say, hey, you're here. I call it the Kevin Owens treatment, right? You know, he comes in, wins the title for a short period of time, and then makes his way over to the main roster. And I think that's what we saw with Ricky Starks. We just weren't ready for it because we're like, oh, Starks just won the title. Oh, we're getting used to him being here. It makes sense. And again, them having plans and not telling us, we saw a massive shift happen on NXT. And we all, at the end, were like, oh, it's all shifting. Got it. That's what's happening here. And so I think, it makes sense for Starks, as we've chronicled here, the need for African-American solo stars on Raw or SmackDown. Ricky Starks absolutely fits that bill to be able to come over, get it done in the ring, have that pizzazz, have that charisma. And what we're seeing is the pathway between NXT and Raw and SmackDown is working because people are coming over and the fans are a lot more familiar.
And here's the thing, you mentioned about, different case studies and different ways certain people have gone and it making sense to who and how they are and their experience and their history. And I think it can be, we said it last week as well, but I think it can be said as well for Trick Williams in the way that he's going. He's coming from, relatively little wrestling experience before coming to NXT. He did have some experience. I think it was about 2, maybe 3 years at the most. Come into it, he's where he is. But then we're like, okay, he's ready for main roster. But then where does he fit? Is he even going to stand out if he comes in? He's Mr. NXT. You can't just come in and just become, low on the low end of the card.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now got a partnership with TNA. Oh, let's put him there. It makes sense. It's another way to ready him for the main roster, or kind of almost make him undeniable as and when they're ready to move him over. There are still so many others we can talk about. We can even talk about the way that Rey Fenix and Penta have gone straight to the main roster.
Yes.
No one had an issue. No one had an issue with that.
No one.
And I think if we did that with Saints, no one would have had an issue either. But at the same time, it still makes sense for him kind of having that out of statement role as well, in the same sense. But you can't leave that man on NXT for too long. For me, it's one of those things as well. It would have been nice for him to kind of keep it a little bit longer, have some matches, have a nice, good run, and tick some butts in terms of the names that he could have defended against and stuff like that.
Sure.
But if this decision is for him to be on the main roster, I wouldn't be mad at that, because, as I said, he could have easily gone straight to the main roster as soon as he signed with WWE. Here's a crazy question, crazy theory. We've seen Seth Rollins start this new group with Braun Breaker, you know, and
Bronson Reed.
Bronson Reed, of course.
Yeah.
People are still waiting for one more person. Austin Theory's been a name. Ethan Page has been a regular name. I saw someone, I think it was on Wrestle Talk, mention Ricky Saints. Not for a second did I think about that at all. But when I actually kind of think about it, it could make sense. For me, it's not, it has to happen. It's got to be him. I think Carmelo would probably be a more likely member. But a Ricky Saints?
Here's where I don't see it. I don't see it because right now, one of the things that's being done is they're keeping continuity between what's been presented in NXT and Raw and SmackDown.
Of course.
So to have him come through that portal and all of a sudden side with a Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker doesn't fully make sense. Plus, we currently, particularly with R-Truth now out of the picture, do not have, and this is a crazy thought, that we do not currently have an African-American male solo babyface on Raw or SmackDown.
Oh, wow.
Consider that.
Don't.
Consider that. With R-Truth was the only one. So R-Truth's out of the picture. We have nobody in that role right now. So Ricky Saints absolutely needs to fit in that role because we don't have anybody there. So that's why I don't think that would be a necessarily a good fit.
And I completely agree with that. What would be interesting is we're seeing, you know, all this stuff with Cody Rhodes, seeing Seth Rollins is in the mix with Jey Uso. Jey Uso's obviously, you know, entangled with Cena at the moment as well. Could Ricky Saints be on the side of Cody at some point?
Oh,
could that be a way he comes in?
I don't know that he should come in that way.
Okay.
I do think that they should at some point play on that because it's a real life thing. But I think if he comes in that way, he ends up coming in as a sidekick. And coming in, he's a star. I think, you know, you let him be a star. And as he's a star, if he then teams with them, now we've got an all-star team as opposed to a sidekick, you know, and Cody Rhodes second or whatever, which that just wouldn't work. I mean, it takes me back to, unfortunately, sorry to mention this name on this show, but the Hulk Hogan days when they would try to pair certain people with Hogan where you just knew they were automatically going to be second fiddle, you know, no matter where you put them in. And so that's where they have to be stars already, which is why, and here's what's wild, that Cody Rhodes would go into a tag team match against John Cena and seemingly the only person he can grab is the world heavyweight champion. So it says level-wise where you have a Cody Rhodes. So if Ricky Starks comes in, shows himself to be Ricky Starks, and then ends up in that space, okay, now we're saying Cody's got all these people swirling around him in that space, as opposed to, oh, this is just my buddy. You know what I mean? So that's why I would want to bring him in, let him stand on his own 2 feet, and then let's tease that relationship over time.
Yeah, for sure. And it would be nice. And I think, as I think you're saying, that it would be nice and correct if Saints was afforded a very similar treatment to a Penta.
Yes.
You know, coming in with, you know, all this accolade and experience and the rocket behind them and all that kind of stuff in as a single star and on their own, as opposed to, you know, as the friend of Cody Rhodes, which isn't the baddest thing on the planet at all. But yeah, allow him to become his own person if that, you know, if that were possible. And if they're thinking like this, you know, having that single male babyface within the company, we don't have that at the moment. You know, of course, we've got the Street Profits who are kind of in tweener space, but they are
Yes.
again a tag team. And then the only other person that we have is Carmelo, clearly a heel at the moment.
And of course, New Day is a tag team, and
yeah, exactly. So it would be nice for that box to be ticked as much as we don't like ticking boxes.
Right.
To kind of have that there.
Right.
The other thing that transpired from that same match with Saints and Paige is, we're getting the Worlds Collide with AAA. The North American Championship will be defended. And so Ethan Page will defend against AAA's Laredo Kid.
Yes.
As well as Phoenix and Javon Evans. We were afforded, for those who don't watch NXT, and I don't understand why you don't, but for those who don't watch NXT, the best show on TV. Anyway, we were afforded the chance to see Javon Evans on SmackDown teaming with Phoenix against
Berto and
those boys. Phenomenal show. And of course, it was a showcase. The showcase for this, this Worlds Collide. How do you feel Evans did, and how do you feel Evans will do come that match?
Javon Evans is special. I mean, that's my guy. He is special. And here's what's amazing. His star just continues to rise. And you can imagine the nerves that might have been going through him. I don't know when he got the call to say, hey, you're debuting on SmackDown, right? Oh, and you're debuting in a tag match with Rey Fenix. Like, that's a dream tag team, And so
crazy.
Oh my gosh. And again, to put them against Legado del Fantasma, a perfect presentation and preview for what we're going to see at Worlds Collide. And I think Javon was amazing. He was incredible. And I just sat back and as I watched this, I thought to myself, okay, so is this, because what we tend to see is they tease these NXT stars on Raw or SmackDown to really get a feel. They had Roxanne Perez, kind of moonlight for a couple of months on Raw or SmackDown. We saw it with Julia. We saw it the night after Mania with Stephanie Vacour. And all of these same people found their way. And so to me, we could make the argument that this was the tryout for Javon Evans on SmackDown. And he absolutely crushed it. He absolutely crushed it. So I think he was amazing. And I think this, again, is where, your success isn't necessarily found in the win-loss, but in the performance. And Javon is special. And so if we don't get an NXT title run for Javon Evans, SmackDown is clearly in his future. Right. It's extremely obvious, and he handled that so well. So shout out to the young OG who has had a banner year already for 2025.
I mean, just his, even from last year, you couldn't imagine, apart from him winning a championship, you couldn't imagine anything that he could possibly do to have a better year than he did last year. And I think he's already on that road.
Main event, stand and deliver.
Right. Like all of these things that he's already done that he can check off, that some people who have been in the company for years can't even say they've come close to.
Correct.
And you've got to, again, consider how young he is and all the rest of it. It's crazy. And, we talked about Saints being that single African-American face. Javon Evans,
easily,
without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. And I think it's a very good way to showcase him in different spaces, whether that be NXT, SmackDown, Worlds Collide with AAA, AAA fans, Mexicans, whatever it is. Just a different space than what he had before. And I feel though that him going straight to the main roster, it's not the baddest thing. It's not. But I think I would just love for him to have a title reign in NXT at some point. before that permanent move. If they
It could
decide to go
happen.
straight there,
It could happen next weekend.
it could do. It could do. Ethan Page has been NXT and North American champion. He doesn't have to hold it for another 3 months or whatever it is.
No,
he could lose it. It's a 4-way. He doesn't have to be pinned.
Right.
I mean, it's the same way Page himself won the NXT championship.
Correct.
From Trick Williams.
That's right.
It would be the sweetest of sweet revenges for Javon Evans against Ethan Page as well.
Absolutely.
So there are so many ways it could actually happen. So that's a possibility. It's a strong possibility. Speaking of possibilities, and that same weekend, I believe, yes, it is the same weekend, the same day.
Yes.
Is Money in the Bank.
Yes.
We know all the females that are in that match. One of them being Naomi.
Yes.
We have been saying from the start of this year, before Mania, it was obviously our own head booker, Mex, who predicted or said, one way for Naomi to kind of solidify this new gimmick, this new presentation, also her longevity within the company, the reason why she came back to WWE is for her to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. With all the ladies involved in that match, how true now do you feel that is a possibility for Naomi to come away with that briefcase?
I'm going to start by saying I think the women's Money in the Bank ladder match is more stacked than the men's.
For sure.
Just think about how they front loaded it with the last think about this. The last 3 NXT women's champions are all in this match. That's crazy. Roxanne, Julia, Stephanie Vacour. Then you throw in there a former women's champion in Alexa Bliss, former world champion in Mommy, and now you've got Naomi. I think it would make it very sweet for Naomi to win this. If you think about the case that can be made, there's a case for all of them that could be made. But I think of the 6 women, the one who needs it the most and can benefit from it the most is Naomi. And we're not just saying this because we cover Black wrestling. It is because all of the women in that match, first of all, Rhea Ripley, this is the same Rhea Ripley who 2 months ago literally privileged her way into a WrestleMania world title match, okay? Like, I love Rhea Ripley, but we got to call a spade a spade. The woman put her name on a contract that her name didn't exist on, and just said, put me in the match. That's all she did. She didn't beat anybody. Just put me in. She privileged her way in, right? You look at Alexa Bliss, who is kind of on the comeback trail. She's been gone from the business for a couple of years. One could make the argument that she could get it, but I think we all feel like you throw her in a title match, it makes sense, okay? I've just described the 3 former NXT women's champions who all, Roxanne, we forget that earlier this year she was in the Elimination Chamber, the only NXT star to be in that. So she's already, I feel like at any point in time she can punch her ticket to a title match. Same for Julia, just based on her resume. And Vacour, come on, right? So that only leaves Naomi. Naomi, who has gone through this character change, Naomi, who is exploring this new way of life. Think about character-wise of all 6 of these women, what Money in the Bank could do for Naomi. The menace that Naomi can become, as the Money in the Bank winner, the way she can terrorize the women's champions, the things she could do to Tiffany Stratton to make Tiffany's life just horrible, right? Like, it's all of those opportunities that I think in terms of the product itself, it makes Naomi, I think, the odds-on favorite in terms of how this story should run out to become Ms. Money in the Bank. So I think she's a great chance. And I think of all 6 of those women, she could be the most dastardly in doing that. That's what, and for somebody who's never won a Money in the Bank ladder match before, I mean, it just all makes perfect sense.
And here's the thing, we talk about, you mentioned the word need, and when we talk about she needs it, I don't think it's even just a simple case of she needs it in order to further her career or whatever else. I think we need it for this whole presentation and everything else to make complete and utter sense. We need it to have the best storyline we could possibly have for any of those women to be holding, or to make sense of holding that Money in the Bank briefcase. We talk about Tiffany Stratton. Tiffany Stratton was the one that stopped her from defeating Nia Jax at least 2 or 3 times when she faced Nia for the women's championship. So again, that makes sense. Again, Rhea doesn't need another title. Doesn't need the Money in the Bank to have a title shot. I don't think she needs to be in the women's championship picture. As great as she is, as much as she would, she would be at the top of the list if you want to just throw someone in there. Her, Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair, cool. You can just throw them in. They don't need a Money in the Bank briefcase. Alexa, again, could be just thrown in, but at the same time, I kind of almost feel as though it's too early within her comeback to be in that position, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And then obviously with all the ladies that have won the NXT Championship, again, for me, too early to put that on them. We've got to remember that the women's Money in the Bank briefcase has 100% rate.
Guaranteed.
100%.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, don't.
Not even gonna say it. No. Keep on moving. We're not even gonna put that in the universe. Just keep on.
We're not. We're not.
Jade Cargill, you better stay where you are. That's all. Okay.
Wow.
Keep going.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not saying it, but I'm sure we all know what we're thinking. We're not going to say it.
We're not going to say it.
But, and again, in terms of what Naomi's done in the company, her coming back, we've been waiting for this thing to kind of make sense in our minds and all this kind of stuff as to why she came back and what did she get from it and blah, blah, blah. If this is the thing, it would be brilliant. And again, out of all the 6 women, it just makes more sense for her than it does for anyone else. So I still believe that she's got a strong chance. When I saw Stephanie was involved, I kind of got a bit weary. Because I think out of anyone else, I think she would also then be another one where it can make complete sense based on what she's done since she's entered the WWE.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So for me, it's out of those two.
I agree.
Roxanne would be great. Julia, I'm not the biggest fan. I can't lie. I'm still waiting for her to kind of do something to make me feel as though like she has to be up there. I think. What show is she on? She's on SmackDown, right?
She's on SmackDown, yes.
So I think a women's US title run would be more fitting for me.
I agree.
When it comes to Julia, again, Alexa, I think she just needs to do something more. I don't know. Rhea, let's just have Rhea not chase the title or just be a number one contender throughout the rest of her career. As much as I absolutely love Rhea Ripley.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't want to say it like this, but we are kind of getting a Charlotte Flair-esque type of scenario where every time she appears, boom. And you can make sense of it, but there are other people that, we can make a claim for. I feel as though Naomi would be great with it. There would still be a whole year for us to play with in terms of how and when she wins it.
Right.
We've still got this whole thing, and it played out on Friday with Jade and Bianca. That's still unfinished. The way Jade looked at Bianca.
Oof. Oof.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that could all still blow up and still happen and all the rest of it, all while Naomi is Miss Money in the Bank.
Yes.
Oh, it would be phenomenal.
Yes.
Gosh. Jeez. Speaking of African American women doing great things, we saw Evolve, of course. Evolve being the. I feel as though NXT, you know, we've been saying this for a while. NXT is moving a little bit away from being the quote unquote development brand.
Oh, for sure.
And kind of in that middle space of like the third brand.
They're the
it's
third
kind of
brand.
like in between. It's in between like the third brand and the development space, which is perfect. But Evolve now is clearly this development brand taking on a very similar but slightly above role as what FCW used to be, Ohio Valley, for example. And we saw Kelly Armstrong become the first ever WWE Evolve, because there was an Evolve before, WWE Evolve Women's Champion, winning a Fatal 4-Way elimination match against Wendy Chu, Kaylee Ray, and I've got a surname, Gray.
Kendall Gray.
Kendall Gray. She
yes.
Kendall Gray is amazing, by the way. And Kelly Armstrong comes out on top. Just give me your evaluation of this woman, a former track star from the University of South Carolina. You know, she looks menacing. I'll let you give me your evaluation of Kelly Armstrong. Go for it.
So I have a funny Kelly Armstrong story.
And
that is, I was privileged to be present for her first match. And it was pretty amazing to watch. And I remember watching her going, what are we doing here in the Performance Center? We just have talent just waiting in the wings. And I watched her, and this was when, you know, she was on Level Up, and it was her first match on Level Up. And I'm looking at her, and I'm just like, oh, she's special. She's special. And it's like here's what I love about what we're seeing right now in pro wrestling for people of color is that we are not monolithic, right? We can be athletic, but we can all have different things going on with us. So you remember, I'm sure, when obviously Jade Cargill showed up in AEW and the immediate comparisons between Jade and Bianca, right? You could make an argument that you have similar body types and similar backgrounds in terms of Kelly Armstrong and Bianca Belair, in terms of them both being track stars and things of that nature. But that's where the similarities stop.
That's it.
Because Kelly has got this, she's got this edge that NXT Bianca didn't have. Because NXT Bianca had an edge. But Kelly has got something completely different. It's a different edge than what Jade has. It's a completely, and so she's the it girl. She's the girl who knows who she is. She's confident in who she is, and she has no problem saying that.
Right.
And it's like she can back it up. You know, I harken back to her first match on Evolve. It was a tag match, and I think Kendall Gray was her partner. And when she lost that match, she was like, "I didn't lose. My partner lost. I didn't lose."
It was Danny Palmer.
Danny Palmer. Thank you.
She went against Kendall Gray.
Yes. So even then you could see that attitude that she couldn't be denied. And so for her to be the first ever Evolve Women's Champion is amazing to see. And I love it. And it speaks volumes to the future of this business. I want to say this lovingly for those who might be very, very afraid. The future of pro wrestling is very black. It's very black. And I'm going to need you guys to get used to that. Okay.
Really.
Because it's undeniable. You look at Callie Armstrong and you can't argue why she's the first ever Evolve Women's Champion. You can't argue that. You look at the success of Bianca. You can't argue it. You look at the success of Jade Cargill. You can't. This is what I'm loving about what we're seeing right now, is at no point is this, we got to check a box. No, these are the best athletes. Put them against anybody. And I think, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think this is where Bobby Lashley was going when he was saying that I hope we get to a point where we don't have to call them the first black XYZ.
True.
They can just be, it's because you're so good that I don't label you that way. I just see you as an amazing athlete. Oh yeah, and you're black. Oh yeah, and you're Latino. Oh yeah, and you're XYZ. So I'm excited for Callie Armstrong. I don't know how long she'll hold the title, but no one can ever take away from her that she is the first. She will go down in the history books forever. And this has to put a rocket ship on her when you start looking at NXT, when you start looking potentially at TNA or Raw or SmackDown. Man, we got something special. We've got something special in Callie Armstrong.
And what's amazing, firstly, about Armstrong herself is, she's got this presence.
Yes.
And I think when you first look at her, I did this. You first look at her and you think of a Jade Cargill who and a Lash Legend, for example, who is also tall.
Yes.
When I found out she's 5'5".
That's the wild part.
What?
That's the wild part.
Her presence, it makes her bigger.
Yes.
Than she is. That alone is gonna take her to heights that we just couldn't imagine at this very point in time. You talk about the future of wrestling being black. We saw, of course, LFG. With Jasper Troy, we're seeing Tyra May Steele gonna come through as well. It's crazy. We mentioned Ricky Saint, Javon Evans, Trick Williams, being the first as well. It's crazy to think that there are still people within this space that are still upset.
Yeah.
That we're not in the space that they want us to be right this minute. And I get it. And it could have happened. We see a Bobby Lashley. We see a Shelton Benjamin still doing his thing. We're all kind of still impatiently waiting for Montez Ford to do his thing. We're wondering what's happening with Carmelo Hayes. We're upset about R-Truth being released. I get it. But look at what else is happening.
Yeah. And this is what I've been saying. I was saying this when people were talking about it. I'm like, guys, we're in a cycle and there's a crop that's coming. And now we're seeing them show up. And so I think what's exciting to me about this is I know people are like, well, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin and so on and so forth. But those gentlemen, I think it's probably safe to say, have more years behind them in the sport than they do ahead of them.
Of course.
And that's said very respectfully. I love what they've done, but that means when you can see a Trick Williams as the TNA World Champion, the first contracted WWE star to hold a TNA title, when you can see a Callie Armstrong, a Ricky Saints, a Jade Cargill, a Bianca Belair, an Oba Femi, we can run down this list, guys. These Javon Evans is 20 years old. Do you see what I'm saying? So the future, we've got time. And so for the year or two that we've talked about and it's really been more of a year than two, that we've talked about, no black male, and think about how specific we have to get. No black male solo stars. That's because we've got black tag team champions. We've got
both sides.
Black women's on both sides, right? Like we got all of these things. So we're getting to a point where we're like getting insanely specific and splitting hairs almost. And I'm saying, guys, hold tight. Because there's no way that that we're going to have an all-black main event at Stand and Deliver that doesn't at some point translate to the main roster, right? I mean, like, that's what we've got to consider. We've got, like I said, Saints on the way. Obafemi is ruling NXT. Callie Armstrong is ruling Evolve. Like, it's in front of us, guys. It's in front of us. So do yourselves a favor, because I think the reason you don't see it is because you aren't actually watching NXT and Evolve, right? You're kind of taking your only, you're taking your only thing from what you see on Raw and SmackDown. So do yourself a favor and watch Evolve and NXT. There's no way you can watch NXT or Evolve and then complain about our presence in the WWE. Because what you will recognize, first of all, is there's no way you're going to get through a segment now without seeing us. It's hard to get through a segment without seeing us, because the names I didn't mention, like a Lash Legend, like a Jada Parker, right? Like all of these names are showing up, and they're going to make their way to Raw or SmackDown, as long as there aren't injuries and things of that nature. The future's really black. I love it.
It's crazy because there are still more names you haven't mentioned,
Exactly.
Sol Ruka, Kalani Jordan, the first NXT North American Women's Champion.
Right.
We've got Keanu Carver and Idris Nofe, who are in the fatal four-way for the men's.
Yeah, Keanu Carver's a problem.
I believe Sean Legacy is going to end up being the champion, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that those guys are then going to be forgotten about.
Right.
Right. Kelly Armstrong isn't the only black female on Evolve.
Nope.
You've got so many others that are coming. There's at least 4 others that have been showcased on the show in a very good light as well.
Yeah.
We go back to NXT. There's so many within the tag team division, within the women's division, the singles division. Wesley did what Wesley did.
Yeah. And his tag team that he's got.
And I understand, and I know someone's going to make the argument, and it's part of it will always be part of the argument as well, that not everyone makes it to the main roster. Not everyone will become a WWE champion.
Right.
But with so many, the possibility is far more greater than having just Bianca, Jade, and Naomi. Right. Like, yeah. The probability is now so much higher, and again, it doesn't mean to say that every single one of these ladies or men that we mentioned will all be the top champion within their divisions. It doesn't have to be that either.
R-Truth just proved that.
Exactly.
He just proved that. He was never the WWE champion, the Intercontinental
And look at the
champion.
outrage.
22 million views.
And look at the outrage.
Yeah.
So it's I think for me, it's, when having this discussion or this argument, let's be real, is this whole thing of us having to have the top and the best of everything that we're involved in. Right. And I get it, because it's not something that we're used to. We should have it more. We can argue, and it is a strong argument that, Kofi, Lashley, Big E's reigns as WWE champion weren't the greatest thing, and we're not necessarily going to remember the reigns themselves or the runs. Booker T, Mark Henry, all of those guys. We can still argue a Swerve not having the greatest run as AEW world champion as well. We can. But at the same time, are we going to forget them? No.
Right. And here's the other issue with this. Stone Cold Steve Austin didn't have long title reigns.
No.
Do you understand? But he's the biggest star in the history of the business, right? Like, I think The Undertaker didn't have long title reigns.
Not at all.
Like, Mick Foley didn't have long time. We could run down, if we started this is why we're necessary, right? Because people don't do their history. To think Dusty Rhodes had 3 title reigns that totaled something like 108 days. Totaled. But he's one of the most influential names in the history of this business. So we've got to stop trying to measure the success or failure of a champion by the length of their reign. Because it doesn't, we talk about Ric Flair because he had 16 title reigns. He lost the title 16 times. And he didn't hold the title for he didn't have a Roman Reigns kind of reign. He didn't. And that was during the era where those lengthy reigns were popular. So I think we got to start considering that the names that we look at as our favorite names of all times were not names that were connected to lengthy title reigns. So then we can't be upset about a Bobby Lashley Kofi Kingston has 6-month title reign. 6 months. Are we really mad at that? Sure, we might be upset because of, hey, he didn't fight this one and that one. But we honestly remember him winning the title more than defending the title. And that moment is the moment that's going to stand. So I think we've got to, and the things that people remember Stone Cold for, they don't remember him for his title wins.
Not at all.
They don't. So I think they don't remember The Rock for his title. They remember The Rock for his promos. They remember Stone Cold for his promos. They don't remember these guys because they held the world championship. And I think we've really got to start thinking about those things when we're measuring the success of our Black champions. Because if our Caucasian champions aren't held to that same level, why do we hold our champions to that?
Right. And that's and that for me is the thing. And you've got to also understand that this whole thing, and I'm about to make a point that probably even debunk my own point, but at the same time, you've got to understand this whole thing is a predetermined thing as well. So when we're giving a John Cena 17 title runs, as you said with Ric Flair, he had to lose it 16 times. Yeah. You know what I mean? He had to lose it 16 times. And we're coming away from this whole thing of lengthy title reigns means this, that, and the next. When Roman Reigns had his 1,000 plus days, we got to day 400 and we were like, all right, let's take it off him, please.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that, please don't think that predetermined means that every element of it was planned.
Right.
So I think people are thinking, oh, well, they planned for Kofi to hold the title for 6 months, or they planned for Roman. The plan wasn't initially for Roman to have the title for 4 years. And you add to that, there's talk that there was actually planned for him to hold it longer.
Yep.
So I think what we have to do is, we can take the predetermined piece out of it, because at the end of the day, it could be my plan for you to hold the championship. But if that title reign isn't producing the kinds of results we think it's going to produce, we can make a change.
It has to change.
I think about when RVD won the world title. Everybody was so happy. Wow, he's got the ECW and the world title. But then he went and did something silly, right? And he went and got arrested because he had weed in his car. And WWE made the decision the next week to pull the title off of him. That wasn't predetermined. So I think people have to consider that whether you consider the sports results predetermined or not, the success as a champion really does have everything to do with what that performer brings to the table. There will probably at some point be a discussion about this Jey Uso reign. And that's a separate discussion for a separate day. But what I think is happening is you can see a person developing as they're holding a championship. The success of it determines how much longer that person continues to be champion. So with that said, and we say all of that with the backdrop of Bianca Belair still being the longest reigning women's champion of the modern era, which the people still won't talk about, right? So it's like we have to, this is why facts and figures and stats and things become important, because if we're going to have an opinion, let's have an informed opinion. And let's remember that our Black champions, like I said, aren't necessarily being measured by the length of reign, or shouldn't be if our Caucasian champions aren't being mentioned in that same way.
And even when they are, again, you've just mentioned Bianca's reign. And we can look at other stats in terms of Bobby Lashley walking in and coming out of WrestleMania as the champion.
Yes.
No one else did that. You know?
Right.
We can talk about, things not being predetermined. Kofi Kingston was never supposed to be the WWE champion.
Correct.
It happened.
Correct. It happened.
Why? Because he was over and the fans loved him and it worked and it happened.
Yeah.
So, there are so many metrics and so many different things to look at, but yet we still kind of feel as though our black stars should be judged in a very different way, or we are judging our black stars in a very different way to most of the Caucasian counterparts. And it's just like, let's have the conversation, let's have the arguments and the discussions and whatever it is, but let them be comprehensive and informed.
Yes, totally.
That is what would make the difference, really.
For sure.
And the future's bright. The future's black.
So bright. So bright.
It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. We could keep going on. I'm so much in a ranting mode right now, but our time is gone.
It's gone. This is good stuff.
It's really good. It's really good. But Gerard, tell us where the people can find you. Of course, just to say this as well. Obviously, with your own Instagram, TikTok and whatnot, obviously you'll put up information, stats, and follow it up with different things. Let us know where we can find you, how we can find you on the net and also outside of the internet as well.
For sure. You can find me at Bonnerfied on all of the social platforms, including TikTok. So thank you for mentioning that. You can check me out with Ashe Wrestling. We got a big show coming up June 28th. You want to be there. The return of Cedric Alexander to the Indies. And of course, being a part of Ashe is going to be very, very special. We've got the Women's Championship tournament matches continuing. Kiera Hogan and Jocelyn Navarro will be battling. A rematch is happening between Karen Bam Bam Renee and Faye Jackson with Hall of Famer Jazz as the special guest referee. We've got the men's championship being defended. Darius Carter defends against Darius Lockhart. And for all who can't be in Charlotte, you can stream it live at AsheWrestling.com. So you can head over there and purchase your link there. Also, you can check out my work with the Nightmare Factory. We got a big show coming up next week. Also, I'll be with Southern Honor this Friday as well. So you can check all of that out on IWTV or on the Nightmare Factory's YouTube page for that. And of course, Ashe Wrestling TV actually is at Ashe Wrestling's YouTube channel, which, by the way, on that YouTube channel today is dropping some of the best of Cedric Alexander, which includes some of his matches from the Indies. A match with AJ Styles is on there. A match of someone else that I'm forgetting that's on there as well. So go there. It's for free. Check that out at the Ashe Wrestling YouTube page and go to AsheWrestling.com as well. So again, check me out at Bonnerfied. The Bonnerfied Podcast Network is up as well. So check that out. And something really cool is coming this month. You'll know in a little bit. I'm very, very excited about it. So be on the lookout. You'll hear more about that in a couple of weeks.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. And of course, you can find me in the one place you need to be, and the only place I need to be too, which is Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Of course, trying my best to keep up to date with everything that's been going on as much as possible within Black Wrestling. And of course, you can catch us here every single Tuesday live on YouTube, on the Black Wrestling Alliance YouTube page, 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Work it out wherever else you are if it's not those two places. And if not, you can find us whenever you want. Of course, with it being on YouTube, on demand, as and when you're ready. Guys, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Gerard, thank you for ranting with me today. And we will be here next week, same time. Thanks a lot, guys. Wow.